I'm hoping the Big Ten has to modify their system for us.
Probably like getting grade 10 sandpaper rubbed on your face every day.
I mean, we say it all the time, whether, there's two types of turds. You're a sinker or you're a floater, but you're still a turd, right? I
mean, we are about players and players playing the plays and not necessarily the plays.
Welcome to the Varsity Club podcast. My name is Derek Peterson. Joining me this week, I have both halves of the Nebraska Shootaround podcast, Jacob Padilla and Jacob Bigelow. Jacob squared. How are you? Either of you that wants to go first, go for it.
Well, it's the first day of the NCAA tournament past the first four. So I've got John Tonje in Colorado State and Baylor Shireman and Charlie Easley in South Dakota State on my TV. So I'm doing pretty well.
Yeah, I can echo that same sentiment. Colorado State is trying to improve the Friends of Jacob Bigelow record so far to 2-1 on the tournament. So, tuned in for a full day of basketball.
For Padilla, what's better for you, the first 48 hours of the NCAA tournament or Phoenix Suns playoff basketball? What's more enjoyable?
It had been a very long time since I experienced the latter. So I guess that one, just because it is so unique and I get this every single year. And also it is my team. And obviously Creighton's going to be playing today, but it'd have to go with the Suns playoffs. But this is in terms of a just viewing experience, just sit down and watch games all day. It's hard to beat this.
It's incredible. Yeah. Bigelow, I would ask, like Kansas City Chiefs in the playoffs, but they're there every single year. So it's probably lost some of its luster, right?
No, it was just pain this year. So it was just a roller coaster from like, that was the coolest thing ever to, wow, that hurt, and that still hurts. But the tournament it's been kind of my biggest sports thing since I was a little kid, and now it's even different, like having friends on different coaching staffs like across the country, and like the abundance of Nebraska kids that both me and Padilla have seen since high school, like playing in the tournament, just makes it even cooler, I think.
Yeah. I just realized I haven't had contact with a Kansas City Chiefs fan to ask this question in a while, so I'm going to ask it.
Oh no!
How did it feel to have basically an entire country turn against your team and your fan base specifically because of one idiot on TikTok?
It was only a matter of time. I think here's the thing. I think like there's a majority of Chiefs fans who hate him too. So it's just like, was it a little over the top? A little bit. I think the stuff with Pat's now wife was worse. Like in terms of the reaction to it and the way like people were getting after her on social media, that was worse. Agreed. But it was only a matter of time, It's these last 4 years compared to the previous 20 of being a Chiefs fan, night and day is an understatement. So this is the life I live now.
Nice to be on top. So I have you guys on today. It's Thursday. We're recording at noon. The NCAA tournament has kicked off. Greatest 48 hours in sports. And so to culminate that, this return of such an incredible run of basketball, we're going to talk about Nebraska basketball. It's only fitting. We have to talk about Nebraska basketball. So I have two people on that are as knowledgeable on Nebraska basketball as anyone that you will find. I mentioned it at the top. They have a podcast that you can subscribe to, leave them a review, the Nebraska Shootaround. Go find it wherever you listen to podcasts. There was a little bit of breaking news about an hour before we started podcasting that Nebraska has parted ways with Matt Abdelmassih, assistant coach. He was kind of their lead recruiting guy. I'm just going to kind of give you two the floor. I guess, is there anything that you want to say about Nebraska parting ways with one of its assistants? Any kind of context or analysis you want to add to this situation, the floor is yours. We can go for however long you want. We're going to get to grading the season and anything else that you want to talk about in a minute. But Abdelmassih, right now, floor is yours. Go.
Well, first, I guess originally, Derek, you wanted to record this podcast last week. I was a little bit busy at the Nebraska State basketball tournament, covering 36 high school games in 6 days. So that was fun.
And not sleeping, I assume.
Yeah, not much, but it worked out nicely. The kind of having this delayed a week gave us a little bit of news to discuss as well. But Bigelow, you want to kind of lead off with your thoughts? You've obviously got an anecdote if you wish to share it.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a significant change. I mean, next year is going to be Fred's first year as a college coach without Matt Abdelmassih on his staff in some way, shape, or form. He was like the assistant to the director of ops when Fred first got to ISU in 2010, and he was an assistant from thereafter until he left for the Bulls. And obviously, he was the first guy here when Fred got to Nebraska. So I mean, it's going to be a pretty significant change. You have to assume that this is probably part of what was agreed upon to bring Fred back another year was staff changes. I mean, we've talked about it all year. You know, it's becoming beyond Groundhog Day at this point. You know, it's the same blueprint as football had to see. You know, for the embattled head coach to come back, he has to fire his friends, and that has now happened in 2 sports. So,
Yeah, it wasn't surprising. I think we kind of knew this was probably going to be the route they were going, and we kind of discussed the model that Hoiberg chose to try again. Obviously, things worked out pretty well at Iowa State. They landed some really good players that fit what Hoiberg wanted to do, and he got those guys rolling. Fortunately, it didn't work to the same level at Nebraska. Just you look at these rosters the last few years and these guys, and Abdelmassih is the one who was in charge of putting them together, and it just didn't fit. There were so many guys that didn't really match what Hoiberg wanted to do, and the result is the 24-67 record over the last 3 years, and it's a talent. I mean, he put together the best recruiting class in program history with his first 5-star recruit this past season. But even with that, the roster as a whole, still, there were just too many weaknesses, too many areas where guys overlapped in both strengths and weaknesses. And the result is 10-22 season, where there was a lot of excitement going into the year, and they just couldn't find a way to get things done. And so I think changing the strategy was a move that he had to make. I do think you need to go more of the traditional route where it's all hands on deck in recruiting, and all of your assistants are involved in scouting and decision making and building those relationships, like almost every other program does. And that just hasn't been the case at Nebraska. Largely, Abdelmassih's basically been the general manager of the team. And you kind of look at it over the last 3 years, or his first 3 seasons, he brought in 10 high school recruits, 10 transfers from other 4-year programs, and 5 junior college recruits. So 25 new scholarship players in 3 years. That's a lot. And again, they were fond of the transfer portal, and everybody's going to have to be moving forward, but they just couldn't quite find the right guys to make things click, and they couldn't build enough stability from year to year to build up some momentum. So I think a change was needed. I think Hoiberg needed to take a more active role in building his own rosters based on what we've seen the last 3 years, and now I think this signifies that he's planning to do that.
Let me ask a quick question that will then be followed up by another, depending on your answer. The season that Alonzo Verge had for Nebraska this year, would you, like if you were charting it, would it be on the upswing as you get to the end of the season? You think he got better as the season progressed, got more comfortable as the season progressed?
Yeah, I wrote about that actually in my Wednesday columns. You can go check that out on my padding and stats column on hailvarsity.com. But he definitely got better, and he came to Nebraska wanting to play point guard, but never having done it fully at the Division One level. He played alongside a ball dominant guard and Remy Martin at Arizona State. And when Nebraska lost out on Delano Banton, when he entered the draft early, they needed to go land a point guard, and they decided he was the best player that they could land. So they're like, let's give this a shot. And Verge credited Hoiberg with his growth as a point guard throughout the season and kind of learning how to play the position. And you could see in the second half of the season, the decision-making improved, the understanding of what and how he should be playing improved. It wasn't perfect. Obviously, we saw at the end of the Northwestern game there were kind of reverted back to what had been the problem early on in the season. But you look at his numbers over the last 9 games, and they were really, really good. Ended up leading the Big Ten in assists. And he played a big part in them winning those games down the stretch, especially that Ohio State game. So, yes, he certainly got better throughout the season. And we saw when he was playing well how things clicked and how, hey, this actually can work. It just took way too long for that clicking to happen.
Okay, so here's my main question for that. It took way too long. So you also talk about 25 scholarship players in 3 years. Is that just illustrative of what you're going to get when you try to build through the transfer portal the way that they have, when you try to just piecemeal teams together each season instead of having, Ken Palm has the thing on his website, minutes continuity. I can't imagine Nebraska has a ton of that. Like, is that just what you're going to get? And if so, then do you think that with Fred going in a different direction for his sort of recruiting and then also with his assistant staff, is that going to change? Is that approach going to change for them?
You want to go first, Bigelow?
Yeah, it's more likely than not, no. But in theory, if I'm Fred, in theory, especially going into what we have to presume is a make or break year, you have to assume they're not looking for 4-year players like right now. They're not looking for high school guys. They're probably right back into, all in on the portal, especially depending on, especially with the news about Abdelmassi today. Does this recruiting class stay, together? All signs kind of point to Abdelmassi playing a key in landing, all of the guys in this recruiting class. Supposedly him and Ramel Lloyd's dad go way back, and he's like the centerpiece of the class per se. So, in theory, a change in staff, that's multiple networks or plans of attack in the portal, instead of just having one. That would probably be what I'd see if I was Fred. It obviously depends on who he brings in to fill the spots, but every assistant coach has their own network, their own region where they're connected the best, their own set of relationships. So I guess the better to have 3 ways to attack recruiting than just one.
Yeah.
If you make it a numbers game.
Yeah, and you look at Iowa State. Obviously, the transfers kind of that's what everybody refers to and thinks about with his Iowa State teams, and that was obviously a huge part of it. But he had some really darn good high school recruits that were part of that deal, and they kind of played multiple seasons there. So he meshed having that core of the high school guys you were developing with landing the right transfers. And he had a really high hit rate in terms of guys that fit for him. And the hit rate has not been the same at Nebraska. And part of that's probably it's harder at this point to recruit in the transfer portal because of the increased competition and obviously Nebraska's lack of history. Maybe they haven't been able to land the guys that they prioritize and would have wanted as those kind of transfers to build around. That's kind of what we're going to have to see moving forward. And what I don't know and what we can't really know is how much of the last few years was Nebraska missing out on guys and how much of it was Nebraska picking the wrong guys. Were these simply the best guys they could get, or were these the guys that they thought could work and just didn't? And so that's going to be kind of the key moving forward is, all right, with different set of eyes, different guys recruiting here. can you have a higher hit rate with the transfers that you do get? Because the option is always going to be there. They're going to continue to hit the transfer portal. Everybody is at this point. And this offseason in particular, Bigelow mentioned we don't know what this recruiting class is going to look like. As of now, it is 3 high school players and 1 JUCO player. And one of them is already on campus. I think Denham Dawson's probably good. Redshirted this year and went through practices and stuff with the team. I think pretty sure you can feel good about him being with the team next year. But beyond that, those other 3 guys are going to have to evaluate where they are and what they want to do. So we'll have to wait to see what happens there. But they're going to figure out, all right, who wants to come back of those guys that have the eligibility and then move forward and try to fill the holes on the roster. And most likely at this point, you're going to have to do that via the transfer portal because most of the high school guys have been picked clean at this point. Most of the guys have already signed. So they're going to have to hit the portal hard for a couple key players. Particularly, they're going to have to replace Verge's production and playmaking via the portal. And it's going to be incredibly important that they nail whoever it is that they choose. If they got to make a decision, all right, we're going to go after, and that's got to be the right guy. I mentioned it took way too long for things to click with Verge. They can't wait 28 games before they figure it out. They've got to land a guy that can come in right away and elevate this team and play the way that Hoiberg wants to. And so that's gonna be the next step. All right. Solidify. All right, what is this recruiting staff going to be? Who are we going to have coming back? And then they got to go out and fill whatever holes remain after that.
One last question on this front, and then we'll move on. How does this impact, if at all, Bryce McGowan's decision?
I don't think it really does. I think he was gone no matter what.
I agree. I think any thought of him coming back was pretty wishful.
Okie doke. All right, let's move on then. So you get one season with the only 5-star in program history. Nebraska won 10 games, 10-22, and they did play better down the stretch. And obviously they had the 2 top 25 wins over road opponents in Ohio State and Wisconsin to close out the regular season. And they lose to Northwestern in the Big Ten tournament. 10-22. Jacob mentioned the record earlier. So 24 and 67 in 3 years at the program. How would you grade this season? Because if you're just looking at win-loss, he won the most games he's ever won as a Nebraska head coach. So we saw a little bit of improvement. How would you grade this season? Bigelow, I'll start with you.
I mean, it's tough to not give it an F. Like, I mean, on a good day, maybe a D-. I mean, this was not, Jacob, you've written about this. This was their year to show something, to show that there was something to sell other than the allure of Fred Hoiberg. The recruiting class they brought in, the transfers they brought in, all of that combined, if you want to, if they want to recruit at a high level, there's got to be something to sell because, going into year 4 under Hoiberg, you can't talk about, Iowa State teams from 7 years ago, like much longer. You can't talk about, we would have gone far in the playoffs if Rajon Rondo hadn't gotten hurt. Like, he loves telling that story, but you can't.
It would have. I just want to say they would have. It would have happened. But I agree with your general.
Yeah, I mean they wanted to. They're not going to get 5 stars year in year out. But if they were going to, they bring in the first one in program history. They needed to show, what Nebraska basketball can be. And instead, it was more of what Nebraska basketball has been for most of this century.
Other Jacob, how would you grade this season? Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it has to be. Comparison to the previous 2 years, you could probably go with the D. There was some improvement, and for the first time for an extended stretch, extended being about 3.5 games. It looked like a Fred Hoiberg team. It looked like it was supposed to look. That things were rolling. Guys were hitting shots. They were playing together, stretching out teams and attacking, scrappy on defense. Like they look like a quality team. But again, it was a 3.5 game stretch in a 32 game season. Just not going to get it done. And like Bigelow said, with the added expectations on this team and the added kind of ground to gain with this season, with kind of making the most of the Bryce McGowan season of having a 5-star bring in here and having him win all these Freshman of the Week awards and leading the scoring or leading all freshmen nationally in scoring and all these sorts of things. That's something to sell, but it's hard to sell that when it comes with 10 wins and a stellar finish in the conference. And so this was supposed to be the year that, all right, they went out and added these pieces that will allow them to have success. They went out and added shooters to kind of create space and give guys like McGowan's and Verge and the other McGowan's room to attack the lane. And it just didn't work. So this was a big missed opportunity to move the program forward. And instead of being a kind of a launching point, it's a kind of point where they have to restart now. Maybe Derek Walker comes back, but beyond that, like, yeah, you're not getting much in the way of significant contributors returning from this season. And I mean, CJ Wilcher at eight a game, like he shot really well from 3, but 8 points a game is your outside of potentially Walker is probably going to be your most experienced significant contributor returning. So it's just going to be a completely different team next year. And I don't think you were able to use that last recruiting class to roll forward into having another great recruiting class and landing another highly touted recruit. Lloyd is a top 150 type of guy, but he wasn't not a 5-star, not a top 50 type of guy. So it's got to be an F. I mean, the result is Hoiberg having to give up money on his contract and change his recruiting staff. So I don't think you can view this season as anything but a failure.
So one of the things you said, they brought in shooters. That was kind of the message coming out of the offseason. They brought in shooters to fix shooting. 2019-20 season, they shot 31.8% from 3. 2020-2021 season, they shot 33.3% from 3. They bring in shooters. This season, they shot 32% from 3 as a team, 265th in the country. So in 3 years, they've ranked 267th. They've ranked 194th. And they've ranked 265th. So, in conversations that I had with Bill Moose, when we talk about basketball, he would almost always bring up like his stylistic preferences watching basketball, the way that he liked teams to play. And I don't get the sense from Trev that he's going to be someone that would dictate style of play, that would suggest style of play, that would even like, make it seem like if you're talking to him, well, maybe is he suggesting this? Is this like what he wants? I just don't get that sense from Trev. So my question is, if Fred is left to his devices, like what do we make of the 3-point shooting? Like what do we make of this deal? Can we have any faith that it's going to get better at this point?
I mean,
because they brought in guys and then those guys forgot how to shoot. And like as a fan of the Oklahoma City Thunder, I spent years hearing people talk about we can teach them how to shoot. No, we can teach Andre Robertson how to shoot. And it just never happened. It never materialized. So like, do we have faith that they're going to either A, bring in shooters and those shooters are going to actually hit their shots, or B, they're going to be able to teach guys how to shoot? Because that was one of the things that Fred also said early on, was that they believed that they could teach shooting.
Yeah. Well, the guy that's going to be identifying those shooters is no longer part of the picture moving forward. So that could be part of it. They're going to have, again, new evaluators, new eyes on the recruiting trail, deciding, all right, who's going to fill these roles. And I mean, they nailed it with CJ Wilcher. He's every bit the shooter that they thought he was going to be. Ended up shooting 43% in conference play. So that's at least one piece there that kind of hit in the way that they were hoping for. They did start to shoot the ball a little bit better down the stretch of the season, but you had guys like Lat Mayen and Kobe Webster, and I mean Kobe got up to 36%, but Lat Mayen was under 30%. Keisei Tominaga right at 33%, and that's he's got to be much better than that if he's going to play because of all his limitations elsewhere. Wilhelm Breinbach was a guy that I wasn't as high on as a shooter as they seemed to be, just based on what I saw from him in high school. Thought there was some potential there, but I think he was a ways off from being a consistent threat at the college level. So we'll see kind of what this next group. I mean, it's going to continue to be a priority for Hoiberg to keep adding shooting. Like they're not going to dramatically change. I know Hoiberg talked about some tweaks he made throughout the season to his offense, but ultimately it's still going to be a Fred Hoiberg team. They're going to play the way that he knows. And so it's going to be important that they find guys that can hit those shots, particularly if you're going to give up things in other areas. So like that, you look at this roster, and something that Bigelow and I talked about throughout the season, there are just too many guys that were supposed to be shooters that were weak in other areas and that they didn't shoot well enough to overcome that. Lat Mayen, CJ Wilcher, Kobe Webster, Keisei Tominaga, even Bryce to a certain extent. Obviously, he brings a lot in other areas, but all those guys are slow-footed perimeter defenders who are supposed to be shooters. And they just didn't get enough shooting out of that group to offset whatever defensive and creation liabilities that they had. So that's why those lineups with a lot of those guys didn't really work. And you saw them play much better once Trey McGowan's got in there and kind of settled in and readjusted to the speed of the game, because a little bit more athleticism, guy that can get after it on defense, can get in the lane a little bit. They just had too many guys that were spot up 3-point guys that weren't hitting high enough to win that battle. So it's going to be a key moving forward. They're going to have to hope that whoever they land can shoot it better than this last group.
Remember when Lat Mayen made 84 of 100 shots in a 3-point shooting drill? Remember how far have we come from then? Not very far at all. But remember when that was one of the biggest talking points around. I mean, that's got to be on the Mount Rushmore of misses of the. Oh, let me tell you about this guy. He made 84 of 100 shots in a 3-point shooting drill. All right, well.
Well, and here
we are.
Can I interest you in some Ben Simmons off-season practice footage?
Well, even man, he did shoot 35% last year and let him in threes made. So you figure, okay, that's decent start coming from JUCO level. Now, if you can build on that, they have a chance to be pretty decent. He did not build on that. He went the other direction. He only made 29 threes all season in more games than last year.
And I will say he came into this year hurt, and I don't think he ever got over that. And I think you could kind of see that in his shot. Like I don't think like he came into the year with a bad back, and I think just the way he was moving on the court all year and his shot, I don't think he ever completely and totally got over that. And that might have played a factor, but still, I mean, it's definitely and he started every game that he played here. He started every single game that he played in here because he was just last year and this year, right? So yeah, he started 2 straight seasons of games. And did he ever get better? I mean, there are 3 things that seem to be evergreen with this program, no matter who the coach is, and it's questionable 3-point shooting, where's a post presence, and why don't guys get better? And I saw that firsthand for 3 seasons. And now, even as an observer on the outside, it's even more prevalent. And it just seems like those 3 things are the evergreen questions surrounding Nebraska basketball.
So I was looking at Ken Palm's adjusted offensive and defensive efficiencies, and I almost had to double take looking at last year's stuff. Nebraska ranked 40th. Ken Palm adjusted defensive efficiency. Maybe I was looking at Nebraska Omaha, but I saw 40th.
Oh, you weren't.
No, it's there.
40th. So they go from 152nd in 2019 to 40th in 2020, and then down to back down to 172nd this season. So if you add in what they're doing with rebounding, they have been over the last 3 years probably one of the 10 worst rebounding teams in college basketball. 349th out of 353 teams 3 years ago, 349th out of 358 teams this season. So there's like a leap. They took a leap defensively. They did something right. I mean, to rank 40th in Ken Palm, you did something right, especially as a 7-win team. But they're not rebounding the ball. So they were obviously doing something. And then they take that step back this season. What happened defensively? And what has to change with the rebounding going forward?
Well, it was a little bit of what I mentioned just a minute ago. Like this offseason, they went out and decided, all right, we are going to get shooters. We're adding shooting to this team, no matter the cost. Whatever else that comes with it, we got to go out and get shooters. So they did that. They went out and got guys that were shooters that aren't strong defenders, that are smaller positionally, and they not only did they not get better, they got worse from 3-point and tailed off in the defense. I mean, there's how many minutes did they play together with lineups where you had Kobe Webster and Bryce McGowans and CJ Wilcher and Lat Mayen out there together, like lineups like that, where those are 4 slow perimeter defenders plus Derek Walker, and he can only do so much. So they kind of made the conscious decision, we're going to trade shooting for defense here and creation. And it ended up being a bad trade. They did not win that one. So I think that's a huge part of the step back, is just kind of the roster changes they made with smaller guys that were more known for their shooting than anything else. And we saw like CJ Wilcher played, I think, more of his minutes at the 4 than the 3 this season, because obviously Wilhelm Breinbach getting hurt was part of that, but they just didn't have, like, Keon Edwards. They decided they couldn't play him. So you played a lot of 4-guard lineups this year, and they played a lot of small wings where you've got Kobe and Verge out there together. You've got Keisei Tominaga out there with a Kobe or Verge. You're just smaller on the wings. So that's where the kind of the rebounding, it wasn't all just big guys dominating Walker or anything like that. It was the wings crashing and rebounding over the top of Nebraska's smaller wings, or running past Nebraska's smaller wings because they didn't box out. So I think those are kind of the source of those problems and the steps back in those areas, just based on the roster and the way that those guys played.
Well, and the answer is not going to be, well, let's just go get longer guys. Let's just go get bigger guys who can still shoot the 3 or who can still kind of semi-shoot. Let's just go get bigger guys to help us rebounding. That's not going to be the answer, because there are very few of those guys in the first place, and literally every single basketball coach in the country wants those dudes on their team. So, like, Jacob Bigelow, you're running practice. What are you doing defensively with drills? What are you doing with rebounding? Is it mentality with a smaller guy to box out?
Absolutely. No, it's all mentality, it's effort, and it's got to be something that's emphasized constantly in practice. I mean, I saw it for 3 years during my time with Coach Miles, when he had a guy like Jim Molinari on staff who didn't really have any other. I mean, he scouted, but his main job was half an hour a day at practice of defensive drills. And that was a point of emphasis every single day, was defending without fouling, also, all sorts of rebounding. It was drilled into those guys every single day. And that was a constant, Miles' talking point was, people want to talk about our offense, but our defense is going to lead to good offense. And for a coach like Fred, who is offense, I said this in the first game of the year when they got out rebounded and lost to Western Illinois, was rebounding and defense are a key to good offense. Because I think one of the best things I've heard recently was someone say that a defensive rebound is the first pass in transition. It's the first pass you make in a fast break in transition, especially to run an offense like Fred wants to run.
And if you can get your guards to rebound, it helps everything. I mean, this is why, sorry, not to localize this. I'm sure you guys probably don't like him very much, but this is why Russell Westbrook was so fun to watch. He'd get the rebound and your offense was instantly set up. If you got a guy that can hit the kick ahead pass and you've got a guy that is an active participant in rebounding on the defensive end, you set up your offense. You can get better looks. You can get easier looks. You can get quicker looks. It's just, it's one of those things. I'll be curious to see how it goes. Cause you can't be, go ahead, Jacob.
Well, Delano Banton did that for them last year. That was a big part of it. His ability to rebound and immediately trigger the break was a huge part. And defensively, he wasn't a great one-on-one defender, but he was so long and active back there. He went in and got rebounds. He got deflections. He got steals. He got weak side blocks. Having that kind of Swiss Army knife piece in the lineup was a big part of their success on defense and ability to trigger the break and play with tempo. And losing him, now you're going with smaller guys out there.
190th in KenPom adjusted offensive efficiency 3 years ago, 179th 2 years ago, 120th this past season. They've made progress. Does it feel like progress? They've made statistical progress offensively. Does it feel like progress?
Yeah, in certain areas, they definitely got better inside the arc, and that's the biggest thing. They were 97th in 2-point percentage this year. Obviously, that was you go back to that first 2 years, those teams played like Hoiberg wanted to play, rim and threes, very little mid range, but they couldn't finish at the rim, and obviously they couldn't shoot. So they were getting the shots, the kind of shots they wanted, or at least shots from the areas that they wanted, but they weren't talented enough to make them. And this year they were obviously Derek Walker, the leap that he made has been huge, was a huge part of that. His ability to finish around the basket. Obviously Bryce McGowan did some special stuff going to the rim. And so they made some progress in that area. They were taking better shots around the basket outside of Verge, kind of some of his, but ultimately it wasn't enough to get the wins. But there is, you look at the roster is talented. There are some better players on this team. There just weren't. It just didn't come together as a whole. Again, there were just too many weak spots to field a winning team. But they have made some progress in certain areas, but it just wasn't enough to ultimately mean anything.
Let me ask you one more question, and I'll let you guys get out of here. Let you get back to conference tournament, or not conference, NCAA tournament viewing. Who are your Final Four teams? Bigelow?
Let me double check, because I, like everyone should, only made one bracket this year.
Me too. First time.
Only made one.
I got yelled at for not making multiple, and I was like, I'm just going to give you the exact same bracket 3 different times.
Yeah, I only did one this year. My Final Four was Gonzaga, Kentucky, Arizona, and Kansas. Definitely feel the most uneasy about Kansas. And then I have Arizona defeating Gonzaga in a classic student beats teacher scenario for the national championship. So
same, but the opposite. Yeah, same, but the opposite for the final. Gonzaga's got to win it eventually, right? It's going to happen at some point.
See, something I've heard people say recently is that if Gonzaga wins a national championship, and especially if they beat Duke en route to get to the Final Four, that is Coach K passing the torch to Gonzaga to be the new Duke, and that they'll go from the lovable, plucky underdog to, now that they've won, everybody hates Gonzaga. So I don't know. I don't know. We'll just have to see.
I mean, Drew Timme doesn't get another 10 years of eligibility, right? I mean, he's about the only thing that I think most people find dislikable on that team, right?
Yeah, probably. But that's just, there's plenty of interesting takes out there in the ether this time of year. I do have a question for you, Jacob, since this has happened since we've recorded, and maybe we can end on it. Sam Griesel, would that be a name to watch in the transfer portal for Husker basketball fans?
I believe. I mean, I think many schools have already reached out to him, including Nebraska and Creighton. So both local schools here are looking to get in the mix with the Lincoln East product, he's strongly considering professional opportunities as well. It's not a given that he's going to go transfer somewhere and play another season. I think he's kind of leaving all doors open at this point. He does have German citizenship, I believe. So could easily head overseas and start making a nice little living over there playing the game. But I think just by the amount of teams that immediately jumped into the mix, he's going to have some pretty good options to play another year of college basketball as well. And I think Nebraska would love to have him. He did make a leap last year from where he was as a junior, shot the ball much better, and kind of turned into a dude that was big in the clutch and made some big buckets for them down the stretch. I think he would fit in well into what Hoiberg wants to do in a kind of Banton type role where maybe he's not the kind of every play point guard, kind of run everything, but he is a big playmaking wing that can help you kind of run your offense. So I don't know that if they were lucky enough to add Griesel, I don't know. It's like, okay, we got our point guard. Now let's figure something out. I still think you have to kind of keep focusing on that position and kind of improving just kind of the overall leadership and understanding and setting up guys and running offense type of thing. But Griesel would definitely be a great addition if they can land him.
Okay. By the way, I feel good picking Arizona and Gonzaga in my national championship, given what you guys just said. I do have UCLA over Kentucky and to go to the Final Four, though. Is it I can confidently say this because Duke will not have played by the time this podcast is released. Is it a given that they make it out of the first weekend?
You see, I think it is just because, I mean, I know there are a lot of people who, want Izzo to knock him out like they did in 2019 with the Zion RJ team, but I think there's a good chance Michigan State loses. That's personally.
Yeah, I was just about to say, is it a given that Michigan State is playing them?
But I just don't think I don't think Duke loses to Davidson. I know there've been some questionable results, for Duke in the tournament over the years. But I don't think Davidson is going to be the team that ends Coach K personally.
I just wonder, maybe not even like matchups. I just wonder what it must feel like to be Coach K's last tournament team and the kind of pressure that brings with it. I was floored that they lost the way that they did to North Carolina in his last home game. So I would just ask about what, we're going to find out pretty quickly how much pressure that team is feeling as his last tournament.
Ultimately, I think their point guard problems are going to keep them back from making a deep run, but I also think they're too talented for that to knock them out in the first or second round.
Yeah, that's fair, especially if they get Davidson, because it'll be Cal State Fullerton and Davidson, and something has to go drastically wrong for them to lose. I'll let you guys get back to tournament viewing. Thank you so much for peeling yourselves away for however long this was. It's good to talk to both of you.
Oh, I appreciate the invite, Derek. Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks for having us.
Of course, it was fun. Like I said in the beginning, subscribe to their podcast, Nebraska Shootaround. Shouts to you guys for listening every week. Shouts to Cam for producing this episode. And we will be back next week. Thanks, guys.
a Hurrdat Media Production.